This video contains spoilers for Fugitive of the Judoon. After having some time to actually process the events of this episode, I've been able to get a more clear idea about what I think of this story as a whole, at least for the most part. One thing that really worked for me within the episode was the way it escalated as it progressed. We start the story off with the plot of the Judoon platoon looking for a fugitive on Earth where they don't have any jurisdiction, and it's a pretty simple premise, and I pretty much thought I knew what this episode had in store for it, but nonetheless, it was really engaging, and I was having a blast with this episode during the first 15 minutes or so. But the further into this episode you get, the more and more we learn about what this episode is really about, and by the end of this viewing experience, my brain was left completely fried. It effectively took me a whole day to recover. I'm still not 100% recovered, but my brain is no longer trying to frantically piece together all this information that was thrown at me over the course of this story, so I think I'm doing okay. So not only do I love how this story escalates, but I love how it really seemed like quite a normal episode going into it, but you come out of it having experienced something completely different. The episode starts off with a rather simple scene introducing us to the character of Ruth and her partner Lee, and we quickly get a clear idea of who the character of Ruth is, as well as get a very clear hint that Lee is a suspicious character and probably the titular fugitive of the Judoon. The use of the Judoon in this story is great, and we know they're working for someone as police for hire, and we don't figure out who that is until the end of the episode, and even then, we don't fully know what's going on. They work so well because why they are there makes sense on initial viewing, and it also makes sense when we get more information about why they're on Earth towards the end of this episode. I thought the companions were really well written in this story. They definitely take a backseat during portions of this episode, but they also have their moments to shine. Yaz shined more in this one than usual. I appreciated how her police officer training was relevant to some of the scenes, and I just think Mandip Gill did a good job when given the opportunity. Graham is quite good in this one for the few scenes that he has. He's the character that we've come to love, and I'm just glad he's around to be charismatic. Ryan is also pretty good in this one. He has some great interactions with characters, and although, like all of the companions, he isn't in some large parts of this episode, I enjoyed him during the parts he was around for, and yeah, I've held off on this for long enough, but now we're getting to the point where I have to talk about it. So, Graham got teleported away mysteriously to this room of what I immediately assumed was the Master's TARDIS. I don't have to explain how it would have been the TARDIS, because it ended up not being the case, so we'll just leave it at that. We hear this American accent speak out, and I immediately was taken aback and in utter disbelief at having just heard what sounded like Captain Jack Harkness. The more he spoke, the more and more I was in utter disbelief at what I was hearing. I didn't think that it could be him because he'd been gone for so long. We haven't seen this character in over 10 years on Doctor Who, so I was completely shocked, and the more he talked, the more I believed that it was actually him because it sounded like him. Surely nobody else would be talking this way, and the second he appeared on screen, I completely lost it. Conveniently, my connection died the second the man showed up on screen, meaning he quite literally broke my internet, but this was fine because it gave me ample opportunity to scream and cheer and shout at his return. My all-time favorite Doctor Who character appeared on screen, and I completely lost my damn mind. I truly couldn't believe what had just happened. Just wow. Everything about this scene is absolutely gold, from the atmosphere to the build-up with his voice to the line that he says when he first appears.
You can get excited now. You miss me, right?
John Barrowman steps back into this role as if he had never left, and his interactions with Graham are absolutely wonderful and hilarious and everything I ever could have wanted, and really, this is just such a fantastic way to reintroduce this character into the show. It was so much fun to see him back, and I loved every single second that he was on screen. I really just had the biggest grin on my face seeing this character again. It was everything I possibly could have asked for. And to get a little bit more into the details of his return, there's a lot of elements within this scene that I quite enjoyed. It's a lot of fun how he mistakes Graham for the Doctor, and I loved how he was using somebody else's ship and managed to scoop up all of the Doctor's companions, but never her. The interactions with Jack and all of the companions are a ton of fun, and in addition to that, he mentions the lone Cyberman. Now, This can't help but get me even more excited about the Cybermen story later this series. I was somewhat apprehensive before because I felt more of a break from these returning villains would be beneficial, but I'm really enjoying how much of an emphasis there is on these things being genuinely important, and with the Doctor saying the line,
"Time is swirling around me."
I'm genuinely very fascinated by how this is all going to come together. So now let's talk about the character of Ruth. I was enjoying this character and how she fit into the story, but even with as many hints as we got into her backstory, I didn't think she was going to turn out to be a Time Lord until she actually broke the glass. There were so many hints that she was a Time Lord, but I really didn't think that was going to turn out to be the case, just because we'd already seen the Master crop up this series, so I kept thinking that her character probably wasn't a Time Lord, but man, I couldn't have been more wrong. The entire misdirection with Lee's character was handled really well because you could immediately tell how suspicious he was just from his introduction, but then when you put the episode into the context of knowing who Ruth really is, then it makes sense. I was really impressed by the way this was pulled off, and I really thought it held up when rewatching. In fact, the implications of who Lee is are really fascinating. He seems to be the Doctor's companion, but when she is human, then he's her husband, so was he always, or was this part of their disguise when she turned into a human? And he also has this identical training to Gat, and he has the line, "Humans," which suggests that he's a Time Lord, so is he even really dead? There's so much with Lee that it does make me think we're going to be seeing more of his character. We'll see if that actually turns out to be the case, but I really hope that we find out more information about him. Also, the end of this episode with the two doctors, I mean, what? I was completely floored by this ending and beyond confused during my first viewing, and I left the experience with my brain completely fried. I couldn't really believe what I had just watched, but I was pretty sure I loved it. And having now seen the episode more than once, yeah, I do love that ending. The moment when she discovers the police box underground was great. It's such a fantastic idea, and it left me feeling very confused and intrigued and wondering what the hell was happening. And I just love the shock of it. It's not a direction I was expecting the show to go in at all. Also, I love that after we find out that Ruth is the Doctor, we're given some quieter moments to remain stunned. The episode doesn't end there, although that would have been a brilliant cliffhanger, albeit a tad similar to the name of the Doctor, but instead we see the shock of 13 as the new Doctor grabs her hand, and the juxtaposition of seeing her treated as a companion and being in utter shock at what is happening was just fantastic. The interactions between these two doctors is great, and I adore how the TARDIS looks. It's very reminiscent of a classic TARDIS, which is really cool, and the new Doctor herself is really fascinating with aspects of her that really remind me of William Hartnell's Doctor and make me really want to see more of her, but there are also aspects of her that are intriguing, and I'm waiting to see how they get picked up on in the future. For one thing, she uses a weapon, sort of. She doesn't actually kill anybody, she just lets Gat kill herself, much the way that 13 let Tim Shaw kill himself, and I thought that worked very well. And there's a bit where she says,
"The Doctor never uses weapons."
I know. Shut up.
and that worked pretty well for me. Also, apparently Gat was Gallifreyan this whole time, and them trying to locate the new Doctor actually goes way higher, and they didn't know Gallifrey was destroyed, either because it wasn't in their time or for some other reason. There's so much going on here that I find myself fascinated and intrigued by, and I really just can't wait to see how Chris Chibnall actually resolves all these elements, because there's a lot to resolve. Earlier in this episode, we also get a great scene with the Doctor and her companions, in which we learn what the Doctor has been up to, and we get a little bit of tension in the group. It's a really great scene, and I just love the direction that the series is taking our main characters. And the opening scene is complemented nicely by the closing scene of the episode, which really brings everything back together. We establish that the fam is there for the Doctor no matter what happens, and they stand up for themselves a little, and I love this moment.
We do know who you are. You're the woman that brought us together. The woman that saved us and loads of other people. You're the Doctor.
Jodie Whittaker really is brilliant in this episode. The way that she performs so many things throughout the story is truly great, and to me this is her best performance so far in the show, and I'm really loving what they're giving her to do this series, and I'm also loving the direction that her character has taken. Overall, I was completely in love with this episode. What started as a really enjoyable Judoon episode somehow got to a point where it left me completely confused and excited, at least with whatever parts of my brain were left over by the end. The Judoon were well used, if ultimately a little bit sidelined in the grander scope of the story. Jack was excellent, the companions were good for what they were given in this. The final revelation and scenes of this episode were genius, and I completely adored everything that was done with the Doctor. This episode left me both speechless and unable to shut up about it. It's basically everything that I could ever want from a Doctor Who episode. This was a fantastic episode, and I am going to give Fugitive of the Judoon a rating of 9.75 out of 10. Yeah, it's that good. If you go back to my Series 11 reviews, you can see that the ratings I gave those episodes were not this high. And I only gave 2 episodes that series a rating of higher than 9, and most of them were in the 8-star range. So I want you to know, I don't throw around these ratings willy-nilly. I genuinely believe that this series has been a great improvement on Series 11 and has been excellent so far. Be sure to let me know what you thought about this episode down below. I'll be happy to have a conversation with you. I hope to see you around soon with my first impressions of Praxeus and a review later in the week. But if not, then just know that I appreciate your time here today. And with that said, thank you very much for watching. Take care and have a lovely week.